Growing Winter Squash as a Specialty Crop in Northern Nevada by Maninder Walia, Melody Hefner, and David Harrison. A presentation of the University of Nevada, Reno Extension. Many producers are looking for specialty crops for their production systems. Winter squash may be a good candidate for crop production. Winter squash are members of the cucurbit family, which also includes summer squash, pumpkins, melons, and cucumbers. Winter squash requires relatively low capital investment. Seed is fairly inexpensive, input requirements are low, and labor requirements for the crop during the growing season are also low. Additionally, introducing a winter squash crop into your existing production system can increase crop diversification, which can aid in breaking a pest cycle formed by previous crops. It is good practice not to place cucurbits on the same piece of land for more than 2 years. Market demand for winter squash is growing as consumers look for better health and nutrition choices. Winter squash is high in vitamin A and fiber and can be a gluten-free carbohydrate easily added to existing diets. This video covers the production practices of winter squash. We will concentrate on farming in northern Nevada. We will discuss 6 aspects: background on winter squash production, field preparation, irrigation, planting, plant growth and pests, and flowering and harvesting. Background on winter squash production. Winter squash plants are monoecious, meaning there are separate male and female flowers on each plant. For fruit production, pollen from the male flowers must be transferred to the female flowers. This is primarily done by insect pollinators. Therefore, pollinator protection throughout the year is critical for the production of winter squash. Winter squash requires a soil pH of 6 or greater, which is common for Nevada soils. It requires full sun and can benefit from protection from the wind. Determining the varieties to be grown is based on local demand for particular varieties, the growing season in your area, and the days to maturity of the varieties you choose. Winter squash are frost-sensitive plants, so you need to know the frost-free growing period for your site and choose a variety that will mature within that time frame. Most winter squash have 90 to 120 days to maturity. Squash are susceptible to damping off, a fungal disease that affects seedlings. Seeds are commonly treated with a registered non-systemic fungal product, Thiram, to protect them from damping off and other soil-borne fungal diseases. Thiram is not approved for certified organic production, so purchase untreated seed if you are growing certified organic crops. Field preparation. Soil testing should be done prior to field preparation to ensure it has the required nutrients for the squash crop. Soil test results will usually indicate if additional nutrients are required. These nutrients can be added during seed bed preparation. For seed bed preparation, the field is plowed or tilled and leveled. Then planting beds can be constructed based on the equipment available at your site. Irrigation. Irrigation is dependent on the water delivery system at your site and the equipment available. Some producers use flood irrigation, some use overhead watering systems, and some use drip irrigation systems. Drip irrigation is the preferred watering method as it provides good water placement and reduces losses from evaporation. This is an important consideration in the desert, especially during times of drought when water allotments may be reduced. The farm shown in this video has well water irrigation that is piped to the different fields on the property. Irrigation drip tape is laid down after seedbed preparation, and then black plastic mulch is installed. The black plastic mulch helps retain soil moisture, deters weed growth, and may even aid in warming soils in the early spring. Planting. Winter squash seed is directly planted, generally by hand. Seed and row spacing will be determined by the winter squash variety chosen. If you have access to mechanized equipment that can handle the size and shape of the squash seed, you may do mechanized planting. In the farm shown, cuts are made directly into the previously installed black plastic mulch, and 2 to 3 seeds are planted directly through each cut into the soil. Seeds are spaced 3 feet apart in the rows. Row spacing varies. At this farm, the rows are spaced 6.67 feet, which is 80 inches, to accommodate the size of the equipment available. Germination for most winter squash occurs 7 to 10 days after planting. Check seedling emergence and survival when the seedlings have 2 true leaves. Reseed any sites where seeds have not germinated or where seedlings have been damaged by rodents. Rodents may pull up the seeds and consume them, and will also eat the tender new growth. There can be significant losses due to rodent damage, so you may need to develop exclusion measures. Plant growth and pests. Plant growth will continue as the weather warms. Generally, by the time the daily temperatures increase, the squash crop's vegetative cover will provide shade, preventing overheating of soil and roots under the black plastic mulch. As the growing season continues and plants increase in size, irrigation frequency will have to increase. It is not uncommon for plants to show symptoms of water stress in the late afternoon or evening, such as wilting or flagging. If the plants show signs of wilting or flagging first thing in the morning, it is a sign that the plants are not receiving enough water. Harmful insects are always a threat. Scouting for insect pests should occur on a regular basis during the growing season. If you need to treat the plants with an insecticide, the application should be made before the flowering stage. Remember that this crop is insect pollinated, so if you have to treat for insect pests, you want to do it before flowering, when the pollinators are less likely to be present. This will help keep pollinators safe and ready to help you with your crop later. The most common insect pests of winter squash are squash bugs and spider mites. Squash bugs are true bugs that attack squash vines, leaves, and immature fruit with their piercing, sucking mouthparts. They prefer new, tender growth and are often found on the youngest leaves. Adult squash bugs overwinter in plant debris or find shelter in other areas in the field. They emerge in spring and lay eggs on the underside of squash plant leaves, generally between the veins where the veins form a V. Eggs hatch in 8 to 10 days. Nymphs mature in 4 to 6 weeks. Nymphs have soft bodies, making them more susceptible to chemical or mechanical control than hard-bodied adults. As the adults overwinter in plant debris, it is important to remove plant material from the field in the fall to reduce overwintering sites for the adults. Nymphs and eggs generally do not overwinter. Spider mites are arachnids, not insects. They have 2 body parts and 8 legs. These very small pests feed on the upper surfaces of leaves. The damage appears as yellow to reddish-brown stripling on the leaves. Severe infestations will sometimes create webbing on the leaves or cause leaves to appear scorched. Leaf loss can occur. Spider mites prefer hot, dry conditions, which largely describes our growing conditions in northern Nevada. Depending on the growing season at the individual farms, powdery mildew may be a problem. Removal of infested plant material is the usual control method. Flowering and harvesting. Flowering and fruit set occurs in midsummer. Again, it is important to remember that squash is insect pollinated, so you should strive to minimize any injury to pollinators. Be thoughtful about any insecticide applications you make throughout the growing season. Checking for ripeness is done late in the season. Ripe fruits change color and the surface of the fruits harden. Harvesting generally occurs before the first frost. Minor frost damage on leaves is not a problem, but fruit should not be frost damaged. Frost-damaged fruit does not store well and is harder to sell. Harvesting is generally done by hand. You must leave a 1 to 2 inch piece of stem attached to all the fruits. If the stem is not left on the fruit won't keep in storage. Squash may be sorted in the field based on size, color, or other criteria, depending on how the crop is going to be sold. This video covered winter squash production in northern Nevada. We covered 6 introductory topics: background on winter squash production, field preparation, irrigation, planting, plant growth and pests, and flowering and harvesting. Winter squash may be a viable specialty crop for our northern Nevada production systems. This may be an economical crop that can be sold in the local markets. Growing squash takes minimal inputs and can provide better health and nutrition choices to consumers.